So that's part of me that's always been quite interested in, something that's not entirely standard in terms of business and entrepreneurship and so on. I have been studying mostly under the umbrella of strategic management, but as a person, I was never really that much interested in things like, mergers and acquisitions and that sort of thing, corporate boardroom. Not really. So yeah, I digress. It started with this particular thing. It started when a longtime friend of my colleague, Dr. Ning Baines, kind of we knew from over there in Thailand that there were some sort of research projects going on about how to develop entrepreneurship within the blind people's community. So that one's very interesting, and so on. So that sort of sparked the idea, because when I heard of that, I think now we're coming to the real reason. When I heard of that, I was thinking, okay, I can see kind of two parallels with what I've heard of before in terms of kind of non-conventional entrepreneurship. So first parallel is with the people themselves, right? So we've heard of entrepreneurship. By that, we had read things about entrepreneurship by migrant populations, entrepreneurship by older people, entrepreneurship by women, and so on. And then we kind of know that if you are of characteristics that are outside of the conventional norms, there will be more things that we might want to figure out. So that's fine. But when it comes to disabled people, which is what we were interested in, so we were thinking, okay, so there are kind of many kinds of lived experience under the banner of disability. So it's not going to be as well defined as the relationship between women and the entire structure. So that's the first interesting bit. The other parallel that sort of popped up in my mind, perhaps even more strongly than the first one, is a parallel to academic entrepreneurship, university spin-offs and patenting and licensing and that sort of thing, which was what I used to do in my previous lifetime. And then I was thinking, so in that kind of area, there's this kind of policy narrative that sees academic entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship as a panacea, which didn't work out quite well. And now I see that sort of thing being replicated in the entrepreneurship policy for kind of non-standard entrepreneurs. So I think if I could help it, I would actually want to kind of avoid that happening again in this area. So that's, for two parallel that got me interested. I think we're quite new. So my colleague and I at BAME, we're quite new in this area. So it's not we're at the stage where we think we might want to do more listening than actively contributing, but we do have our own agenda to push. And so I would call that aspiration for the moment rather than a solid contribution. We actually want to question when it comes to it, and now this links back to the idea of entrepreneurship as a policy panacea at the beginning. I think we're kind of trapped in the thinking where our dependent variables or the outcome is new firm creation, and we're counting that, which is pretty much the same with academic entrepreneurship. So we're thinking of, so when it comes to using this as a developmental tool for certain social groups and so on, why are we not thinking more clearly about non-economic, non-market value of entrepreneurship? So that's, I think now, and then we go into the sort of, ontological, philosophical underpinning of what we think entrepreneurship means. Does it mean the outcome, or does it mean the process, or does it mean mindset and so on? But then I think we have to get our variable into something more realistic and sort of more beneficial to the people that are doing this, as opposed to when it comes to measuring entrepreneurship success by counting new firms being created. It leads to all kinds of gaming, which we have seen in academic entrepreneurship. And if we continue with that path for migrants, for disabled people, for women, it's only my pessimistic suspicion, but I think we're going to see pretty much the same thing, where regional policymakers would be trying to say, oh, we have been very successful because this is a number that we have gathered and so on according to our methodology. But then if you look at the people that we're claiming to help, maybe not, they're not going to feel the same benefit. So that's, I think, the non-economic value of entrepreneurship is our aspiration, our agenda at the moment. To me, anyway, because I'm interested in, so as an academic, I'm interested in the experiences of the people in whose, how do I say this? So I'm not disabled myself, but I'm interested in their experiences and how, that relates to different dimensions of entrepreneurship, which means that I think the language and the understanding of lived experience would be my main struggles. So when it comes to the language, so there's that. I'm not really part of that group. And then the other thing is that I'm doing research in English. And there's a whole history before I even became aware of, this field of study. So there's a lot of things that I have to learn. So what would be the implications if I chose this particular word, for example? So in the area, you still have, people advocating for the word people with disability. And on the other hand, other groups say, well, we think disabled people is probably more appropriate. And I'm still, this isn't really my language. And when we do this in my own culture in Thailand, I think kind of people are probably less fussy about this sort of thing, because maybe we have this kind of, even though it's not fully verbalized, we have this kind of shared sort of experience, as in, okay, we recognize this as going on in our society, but when you go to the international venue with English as a common language, there's so many things that could go wrong in terms of interpretation. So it's the language and the understanding of lived experience, which is why we're very keen on participatory kind of research, action research and such, although action research doesn't get you published very well. That's what I've gathered so far, but I think that publishing or not publishing, that's going to be key for the research actually being useful in the future. So I think we touched on the non-market value of entrepreneurship. So that's our kind of initial agenda. And the other thing, I think it's probably a legacy from my own history of doing research in competency and knowledge production and so on, where we're also interested in what we mean by competence when it comes to entrepreneurship. So now there's so many frameworks, right, about entrepreneurial competencies, entrepreneurial so on and so forth, but then they haven't really been validated. I don't want to use the word validated, but I'm stuck for words. But anyway, so we don't know how those things are playing out, because from our latest literature review, which is under review at a journal, so where there's this mismatch between what we see as a kind of structural hindrance, structural inequality of, being a refugee, being a woman, being disabled. And then once you sort of move to what the research has been saying about how do we mitigate that, you only get things at the individual level, as in this refugee, when they go to another country, they have to do this, or disabled people, you have to do that, as in it's overcoming deficit just to be the same as everyone else. So it's a kind of, is the competency that much individualistic, or is there a social element of competency? So that we're also interested in the social dimension or social characteristics of competences, but that's probably the next step that we can think of. And then we also, there's another thing I can think of in terms of future research opportunities, which is opportunity itself in in entrepreneurship. So I think it's, even with the mainstream type entrepreneurship, the word opportunity is quite contentious. I'm not an expert in that, so I'm really hopeful that other people might pick this thing up. But then when it comes to opportunity, is it found, or is it created, or is it discovered? And with people who are already subject to structural inequalities, how do they experience the finding or the realizing of those opportunities? So those are kind of the three areas that we're quite interested in, but admittedly we're not as well equipped to really study the last bit, which is about opportunity, but we think it's very important nonetheless.